Welcome to the September 22nd meeting of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board of Education. Superintendent, please take the roll.
Yes, Mr. Reed.
Here.
Mr. Hoover.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Short.
Here.
Mr. Huey.
Here.
All are here.
All right. Is there any public comment on closed session items? No. Okay. The board will be going into closed session to discuss items related to student matters, including expulsion recommendation, case number 2223-1S, employee relations, conference with legal counsel regarding litigation, conference with real property negotiators, and personnel matters. The board will be back in session at 6 p.m. for open session. Thank you. Welcome to the September 22nd meeting of the Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board of Education. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. Broadcast statement. A broadcast and recording is being made at the direction of the board, and the broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. Folsom Cordova Unified School District Board Policy 1313 promotes mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct among employees, parents, and the public. We will treat staff, parents, and members of the public with respect and expect the same in return. If any member of the public uses obscenities or communicates in a demanding, loud, insulting, and/or demeaning manner, the board will calmly and politely admonish the person to communicate civilly. Public comments during board meetings are an important component of public engagement and transparency, and all written comments submitted to the board by 3 p.m. today have been read. Per the Brown Act, the board is not allowed to enter into a two-way discussion on any matter not on the agenda. The superintendent will call roll for the board to acknowledge receipt of the electronic comments submitted by 3 p.m. today as it pertains to today's board meeting. Superintendent, please call the roll.
Yes, Ms. Perez?
Here.
Ms. Srivastava?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Hoover?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Short?
Here.
Mr. Hui?
Here.
All are accounted for.
All right, thank you. That moves us to agenda item 5, reporting out of closed session. Superintendent?
There's no action to report out of closed session tonight.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, adoption of the agenda.
I'll move it.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Clark, second by Mr. Short. Superintendent, call the roll.
Yes, Ms. Perez?
Here.
Ms. Srivastava?
Aye.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Short?
Aye.
Mr. Hui?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
All right. Agenda item 7, special presentations. I understand we have no special presentation from the students tonight, but we do on staff. So Superintendent.
Yes, we have a video presentation that's coming to the board this evening at the request of the board from a previous meeting. And this is raising awareness about the dangers of fentanyl and the One Pill Can Kill campaign. We showed this video to our secondary schools and students and shared it through our communications department. But our board also felt it would be important to show it here at the board level. And we're not going to relent on getting this message out because we really need our families and our students to be aware of the dangers of fentanyl. So with that, we're going to hear the Zach Didier story, student from the Roseville area. I'm going to ask Rochelle to play the video.
I built up some courage to look a little bit into the phone before giving it over to the detective, and I discovered a video.
You ready? Me too.
So it's his handsome, beautiful face, and behind his shoulder, you can see our dog, Jake. Jake loved to sing when Zach played piano. When I found this video, it encapsulated everything beautiful about him. His love of the piano, his incredible talent, his playfulness interacting with Jake, his beautiful smile, just his heart, his talent, his spirit. And I mean, I watch that video all the time when I need to feel him alive. Zach was the kind of child you dream of having.
Hi, Grandpa.
He lit up a room. He was always smiling and always laughing. He was incredibly gifted at the piano, and he started from as soon as he could get on his little tippy toes and reach the keys. Once he started a theater class in high school, he got the bug. He tried out for his first show and was cast in the lead role.
Zach was a talented and recognized multi-sport athlete. He was in track. He started out on the JV team and then shortly after that accelerated into the varsity team.
He received that season the Coach's Award.
Zach was disciplined. He's a bona fide straight-A student. He was able to enroll in just about all of the AP classes he was allowed to.
His friend group was a lot of really bright kids.
He was very loyal to his friends. Once he brought someone into his friend group, he really went out to help them out any way he can.
He loved people. He loved making people smile. He would often be the one that would try to cheer someone up or make them laugh.
He is a kid who absolutely left a unique fingerprint in the world. He is truly an unrepeatable miracle for us. So it wasn't until Christmas time that there were some subtle signs that showed a little bit of a difference in his behavior.
He just seemed more tired than normal, a little bit irritable. He just explained it as, I stayed up playing video games, it was COVID time. And he just said, Mom, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. And I said, honey, it's my job to worry about you. I'm your mom.
After Christmas, he hung out with his friends. As a parent of teenagers, my fear is when they're on their own, exploring their new expanded boundaries. So when he came home, I felt a sense of relief, not realizing there was imminent danger in his pocket or in his possession. When I say goodnight to my family, especially my children, I always say, good night, I love you. And Zach, every single time, without fail, always told me, I love you, Dad. Those were his last words to me. The next day, I went to check on Zach because it was later than his normal wake-up time, and he appeared to be asleep at his desk, and I got within 2 feet and I knew something was horribly wrong, and I immediately started rendering first aid to Zach with CPR. And those moments I feel very haunted. No parent should have to see their child lifeless and initiate CPR to try to save them.
There was all these people on the driveway and Chris and our other 2 kids. And, Chris just came up and said, our baby's gone.
The coroner told us that Zach either died from a natural cause or fentanyl.
We were like, what is that? I hadn't really ever heard of fentanyl.
What we have learned is Zach started to experiment. He purchased what he thought was a pharmaceutical grade Percocet. Instead, it was a counterfeit pill, and the only acting agent in it is fentanyl. And it was an extreme amount that was fatal.
We found out that it was through Snapchat that Zach had connected with this dealer and gotten the pill.
Social media is the #1 go-to platform for drug dealers.
They press it to look exactly like a Percocet, a Xanax, an Adderall, oxycodone. The level of fentanyl in each pill is completely inconsistent.
And it takes as little as 2 milligrams worth of fentanyl, or about the same amount as 2 grains of salt, to be lethal.
These pills are everywhere. In basically any pill that you get on the black market, you can be assured that it is one of these fake fentanyl pills.
None of Zach's friends were aware of the dangers that exist now from counterfeit pills.
None of us were. Fentanyl, it robs you of any chance to get red flags. I mean, he had no other pills in his room. He had no other anything in his room. With fentanyl, I mean, you can try a pill 1 time or 2 times, and it takes you out. If I had known about illicit fentanyl and how prolific it is, it would have caused me to have different conversations, with Zach.
It would have been a sit-down conversation as a concerned parent to say, hey, Zach, I just learned about this. Have you heard about this? Are you getting any kind of products on social media? Knowing Zach, he would have thought, okay, maybe that's playing Russian roulette.
We talked to Zach about every danger that we knew, but this one we didn't know. And that's why we have made it our mission, to join with other parents, to educate the community.
We want to bring to light the dangers and how pervasive it is. This can happen to any family.
Look at this place.
We can't ever bring Zach back, but it does help mitigate some of the pain, thinking that maybe we've saved other kids. Maybe Zach has saved other kids.
Wow. That was, you asked for this to be shown. Thank you. It's an epidemic out there, but a poignant story like that just really resonates, local too. Since you asked for this to be shown, do you want to start the conversation off?
I just want to thank Chris and Laura for actually making this. They actually were at Vista, and they did a presentation in front of their student government, and I reached out to them and just said, hey, you know what, I hope that we can share these in our schools, and I'm glad that we did. Moving forward, we just need to bring about more awareness about fentanyl and the dangers of this poison to our students, and we have to keep driving it home and let these students know that this can actually kill you. Actually, on the corner of Cordova Lane and Zinfandel, there was a student, former Cordova student, I think he graduated 3 years ago, who actually lost his life to fentanyl poisoning. So it's real, it's out there, and we just need to keep educating our kids that, this stuff is going to do you damage. And, like I said, hopefully we can continue to drive it home till these kids get tired of hearing it. So that's it.
Superintendent, just out of curiosity, what type of programming outside of health class do we do in the high schools or the middle schools related to this topic? I assume there's at least some type of conversation going on.
There is, and it happens, during assemblies, during class time. We do have our Director of Health, Carrie Kay, on in the virtual Zoom room that is ready to answer that question and to give more specifics. So, Ms. Kay, did you hear the question? Yes.
I did hear the question, and you are correct. There are other programs that we have in place. They don't necessarily address just fentanyl. They're addressing alcohol and other drugs and all of those risks that face our young adults and our teens and even our middle schoolers. And I would say even down to our elementary age kiddos. We don't do a lot of the drug education in elementary, but we certainly do start that in 6th grade and on up. And I want to agree with what's been said in terms of we need to educate our children, but we also need to involve parents. We need to involve parents because so many parents, just like the Didiers, did not know. Somehow we need to continue to get that message out to parents and guardians and grandparents in the larger community. I think certainly our local news media has done some, and the Didiers continue to share their message, and there are programs out there through DA called One Pill Can Kill. But the scary thing is that these drug dealers, these people who manufacture all these things in the name of a dollar, they don't care what it does to the user, because for one user, there's 10 more. And so it's pretty scary out there. And I think certainly there are things that a school district can do, but I would love to see what the larger community can do to really help educate our students and prevent more of these kinds of poisonings and deaths.
This was a short video, but I think packs a real punch on what the dangers are. I think the Sacramento County DA, I think they have a program called One Pill Can Kill. That literally could be your first attempt of using an illegal substance, and it could kill you. And I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity perhaps to even show this video, being it's only 8 minutes, in all of our secondary schools during, did they show this video?
Yeah, they did.
Yes, but they will make it available again. I think at Vista, Ms. Shrivastava saw it. I'm not sure at Cordova High if Ms. Perez had a chance to see that.
Only a few students got a chance to. Personally, I did not, but I wish that everybody would have gotten a chance to watch it.
So we need to share that opportunity again. I think going alongside that is the internet safety training that we're doing, and Mr. Meyer, who's also joining us virtually, is making sure that we have that training in place this year too, because the internet and the dangers of social media are at the root of it.
I mean, maybe even during, well, they don't call it homeroom anymore, but during that time period at the high schools, maybe we could even ask the teachers to show the 8-minute video, unless they may have already showed it to their class already.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll be revisiting it. And, as soon as we hear of one type of drug, there's another one that's right behind it. And now rainbow fentanyl is what's, something that we need to be aware of too. And that just came our way just within the last 2 weeks.
what's it called?
Rainbow fentanyl, and the pills look the same, but they're all different colors, so that the colors may make it more appealing. So just, we have to be so vigilant. Yeah.
Any other board members want to?
I'm just thankful that, and I know we had brought it up with at the last board meeting about all the schools having that, what was it? I can't even remember the name of the. Narcan. To have that available at all the schools.
Right.
And what's the status on that? Do we have?
Ms. Kay, the status on, after we approved the policy last meeting on administering medications, there was agreement to have that at every school as per our board policy. And we were going to get it ordered, and then also folks trained at every site. Are there any updates on that?
It's all still in process. We are working on getting it ordered. Even through, I know people are like, well, you can get it off of Amazon. We can, but there is a limit to the number that you can order, and it would not even cover 2/3 of our schools. And so we're working with the pharmacy that supplies our stock EpiPens to see if they would be able to meet that need so that we could have 2 per school site. So that is in process. And then also I'm trying to vet a good training that we can give some background knowledge to key folks so that they know, what they're looking for, as well as how to actually administer. So everything is in process, and my hope is that by mid-October, we can come back at that board meeting and let you know what all we have done and the progress that's been made.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Oops. Yeah, I just wanted to say that this year in the legislature, there was a bill to increase penalties on fentanyl dealers, essentially. And it was a bipartisan bill. It didn't move forward, but I think if it comes back next year, it might be something we should look at supporting as well. So we can continue to advocate on all levels. So, but yeah, thanks, Chris, for suggesting this video. It was great.
And I think the good thing is that they did catch the dealer and did convict him. So it's just one less person off the streets that's stealing the stuff. So just thankful for that.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, let's move on to public comment. I do have one written public comment. Someone wants to speak. Karen Jutton, welcome.
Good evening. First of all, I want to say thank you for your service on the school board. And I want to introduce myself. I'm here to speak for a parent and a child at Sutter Middle School. And I know that the parent has spoken to you, David Reed, and to you, Joshua Hoover, about transgender males undressing in the locker room and using the bathrooms. And apparently she said this male is 8 feet tall, much stronger than the women in the junior high school, the 7th graders. And the daughter really doesn't like it. It's a dangerous situation. I'm sure that you're all aware of the girl who was raped in Loudoun County, Virginia. It hit the national news. And I want to warn you that if a girl is raped in any school because of a policy that you set here in Folsom, Cordova, that you're responsible for that. You can set a policy for separate accommodations for these transgender students to undress for PE and also to use restrooms. And I know you have enough money to do that because, you have all that money for other things. You can certainly put that above, say having a day of understanding, paying for that. You could pay for a bathroom because this is a dangerous situation. Having males in with females is a dangerous situation. And very often these transgenders are fluid. I happen to know that personally. So I know that as elected officials that you have a bond and you are personally and financially responsible if a girl is raped or assaulted in any of your schools. And is that my time? 10 seconds. I just want to let you know that I will help anybody go after your bond if someone is injured in your schools because of your policy. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Jen Tarbox. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to kind of touch on the fentanyl issue that you all just watched. And like Ms. Clegan said, the rainbow fentanyl is out right now. It kind of is like Smarties candy. I do push and advise the school send something home that goes especially to the younger students. The high school students, it's a little bit harder, a little bit different to spread the communication. But the big issue right now is Halloween and Halloween candy. The problem with fentanyl in these kids today is, and I've had conversations with a lot of the youth in our community that have drug problems, and one of the things that's been relayed to me over and over is when they take something and they realize there's fentanyl in it and they're addicted to drugs, they go, oh, whoa, I'm just gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna hold off for a second because that has fentanyl. They know it, but they're addicted. The problem is the rest of the community is not talking about it. I think it's much worse than most of you actually realize unless you know a kid that's been addicted to drugs or your child is friends with someone that does drugs. Trust me, if you haven't had it reach your house or you haven't watched a kid deal with this issue, you have no idea how big this problem actually is. I do urge the school, something needs to go home to every student, elementary and lower, about Halloween because that is a huge issue. These drug dealers do not care. But not only that, teenagers that get their hands on it don't care if they're giving it to a 7th grader or 6th grader or 5th grader. So just if something can go home to everybody before Halloween. For the high school program, that video should be shown on the first day of school in every assembly. 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade should be sitting in the auditorium watching that video. There's no option. It shouldn't be class here, class there. Lots of kids tune things out. They're going to tune things out, and parents are not having the conversation because it's uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. They're not trained how to have the conversation. Narcan, there's 2 products. There's a nose spray and there's also a shot. You could get it from Walgreens. The state also will offer it to any system. I don't know all the details, but I was researching it today, but you can get it from the state. You can get it from Walgreens. They all have Narcan. Parents need to learn how to use it. The educators just need to be aware of what it looks like. It's just a bigger issue than we all realize, so.
Thank you. Do we have any comments online? No? Okay. Then we will go to item number 9, reports of district organizations, and we'll start with the Student Advisory Board.
Student Advisory Board has no report tonight.
Okay. Next, California School Employees Association. Are they online? No? Okay. And we'll go to the Folsom Cordova Education Association. Welcome, Angelica.
Good evening. Okay, well, FCEA's PAC completed the interview and endorsement process, and I'm pleased to announce that we will be endorsing Ed Short and Kara Lofthouse for FCUSD School Board. I think I had a typo. Mr. Short comes from a family of educators and has dedicated many years to our district with a proven track record of supporting students, families, and educators. Ms. Lofthouse will bring a fresh, multifaceted perspective to the board as a former FCUSD employee, educator, and administrator. She's also a parent and a local small business owner of her own learning center. We look forward to proudly lending our support to their campaigns in the coming weeks. And I just want to end with, still a little shaky from that video, but on behalf of FCEA, I look forward to the approval this evening of naming the library at Mangini Ranch Elementary after Jennifer Mulder, who passed away so unexpectedly earlier this month. Jennifer was a 3rd grade teacher who was passionate about teaching and so dedicated to her students. I had the privilege of visiting her class last year and could see the impact she had on each one of her students. In the short time I was there, she effortlessly connected with each one of them and showed them that they mattered and were an important part of the classroom family. Her passing is a profound loss for our whole community, especially the Mangini Ranch family of students, parents, and colleagues. Jennifer's legacy, however, will live on through naming the library after her. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Folsom Cordova Leadership Association.
Good evening, Board President Reed, Dr. Kaligian, and members of the board. On behalf of FCLA, I'd like to express our gratitude for the recently approved compensation package. We appreciated the collaborative dialogue throughout the process and the contributions and support provided to all of us for the hard work that we do. Ongoing growth and learning is something that we here in FCUSD encourage and celebrate. And tonight I'd like to feature Vista Del Lago Principal Kim Moore and publicly congratulate her on her recent doctorate in education. Dr. Moore received her doctorate from the American College of Education, where her dissertation research focused on Tier 2 academic interventions. Dr. Moore's quantitative casual comparative research compared the difference in student achievement following the implementation of Tier 2 academic intervention at 3 suburban high schools in California. The school offering the most time for intervention saw statistically significant gains when compared to the other 2 schools. And I know she does that over there at Vista. Congratulations to FCLA member, Dr. Kim Moore. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we have the District English Learner Advisory Committee.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Kaligian, President David Reed, members of the board, and my esteemed colleagues. I do have a quick report. Met with the officers a week ago of DLAC, and usually we do this agenda setting in late June. early to late June. Because we needed, the state had delayed the submitting of the CARS, which is the application for categorical funding. We went ahead and discussed this with the officers so that we could look at funding together for the year. And so they agreed that this was the right time to meet. So here I am. So a couple of things that have been set and confirmed is you should have a packet in front of you, and one of them looks like this. And this is just a little flyer for our upcoming Parent Summit set for Saturday, October 29th. We're excited to be back in person. I can't tell you how excited we are about that. And we went ahead and worked on a theme, and I presented a couple of ideas and listened to their feedback, but I shared the initiative on fostering connections, and we're doing some work with fostering connections as well as opening doors. And they really liked the fostering connections with our educational partners as our theme for the year. So as we move forward, we will be focused on fostering connections and those services and programs that support that initiative in our district. So again, our first Parent Summit will be October 29th at Rancho Cordova Elementary from 8:30 to 11:30. And I'm excited to tell you that we'll be featuring Kate Hazarian and Carla as well. They'll be sharing with us the community schools and some other really just fascinating topics. So in addition, you'll see that we have our schedule for DLAC for the year. I wanted to share with you that these are the calendar dates and times and locations. They did express an interest in continuing some online meetings, maybe every other one, so there may be a change. I felt very strongly that we keep the physical in-person appointments and then switch to distance or virtual if need be. Their sentiment was that some parents struggle to drive to a location for a meeting, but yeah, they could still feed their children while at home and attend a meeting and not miss out on the pertinent information and interaction. So we're definitely taking that into consideration. And last but not least, in addition to the October Parent Summit, here are the remaining two that we'll be featuring. And again, the first one is October 29th. The second will be in February. And the last one for the year will be in April. And you'll notice it's a Tuesday night. Again, some shared feedback was that Saturdays in the springtime are a little jam-packed. Parents and children are out either participating in activities and sports, and so they'd like to see an evening event during the April time. So that's our report, and we look forward to seeing you in our upcoming DLAC meeting on the 19th. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to agenda item 10 on consent. Board Member Srivastava, I think you had an item you wanted to be pulled.
Yes, please. Could we pull item F so that myself and my fellow student board member can abstain?
Yep. All right, we'll pull item F. As for the rest of the consent agenda except for F, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move it.
A motion by Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hoover. Superintendent, please take the roll.
Yes, Ms. Perez?
Aye.
Srivastava?
Aye.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Short?
Aye.
Mr. Hui? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
All right, and then item F, approve expulsion recommendation, case number 2223-1S, was pulled from the consent agenda so that the student board members could abstain. The background on this was in closed session. So
I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Hoover. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Or I defer.
I'll second.
All right, a second by Board Member Perez. Superintendent, call the roll.
Yes, Ms. Perez?
Aye.
We're going to abstain?
Abstain.
Yes, I abstain.
Okay. Ms. Srivastava?
I abstain.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Short?
Aye.
Mr. Hui?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I understand we have an introduction. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. We do have an introduction of a new administrator that the board approved in the personnel action form that the board just approved in the consent agenda. Very excited to introduce our new human resources manager, Ms. Roxanne Aguiano, and she can come up to the podium while I introduce her and tell her, the folks a little bit about her background. First, let's give her a round of applause. Ms. Aguiano has over a decade of experience in human resources, managing high-volume staffing, supporting departmental budgets, and streamlining the recruitment process. She's a familiar face in our district. She's previously supported our Human Resources Department as a personnel technician. Her most recent experience was serving the City of Galt as an analyst in the HR department, where she managed recruitment, including the offer process, and collaborated with city payroll and benefits departments to lead strategic efficiency initiatives. Ms. Aguiano has a passion for taking care of the organization's people and dedicates her energy to being a good steward of available resources for employees. And we're very excited to have you back and back on board with Folsom Cordova. So welcome, Roxanne.
Thank you so much. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and the public. I am ecstatic about this opportunity and coming back to the FCUSD family, and I'm looking forward to helping all our school sites with our classified personnel hiring and managing our personnel issues. Thank you for having me tonight. It was a pleasure meeting you all.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Congrats.
All right, that moves us to agenda item 11, discussion action of A. The first item is approve request to name the Mangini Ranch Elementary School Library the Jennifer Mulder Memorial Library. Superintendent.
Yes, and in honor and memoriam of one of our longtime teachers in Folsom, Cordova, Miss Jennifer Mulder, who unexpectedly and sadly passed away at the end of August, the Mangini Ranch staff and district staff would request that the board name the library at Mangini Ranch Elementary the Jennifer Mulder Memorial Library. We heard a little bit about her background in the district from Ms. Miklos. She has served as an instructional aide in the district and then became an educator. She's been in the district over 20 years, touched the lives of many students, staff, and families throughout her tenure working at Theodore Judah, Gold Ridge, and Mangini Ranch Elementary. So a tribute to her dedication as a teacher and for all the students that she loved and connected with, we ask the board to consider this request.
Thank you. Any board discussion?
Mr. President, if there are no public comments, and hopefully the board will agree by consensus that we go ahead and move this item, and I move it for approval.
All right, let's just quickly see. Any public comment? Any on that? All right, we have a motion by Mr. Clark and a second by Mr. Hoover. Superintendent, take the roll.
Yes, Ms. Perez.
Aye.
Ms. Srivastava.
Aye.
Mr. Reed.
Aye.
Mr. Hoover.
Aye.
Mr. Clark.
Aye.
Mr. Short.
Aye.
Mr. Hui.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Item B, approve certificated assignment under a variable term waiver for the 2022-2023 school year. Superintendent.
Yes, this evening we're requesting the board approve 2 teachers who must have a certificate to teach driver's education, and in lieu of a certificate, we ask for a waiver. The 2 teachers are a Cordova High teacher, Cameron York, and a Vista Del Lago teacher, Charles Uribe. Both of them are PE teachers and have consented to the assignment. So with your approval, we can get them ready to teach driver's ed.
Any questions from the board?
No, these are actually a weekly routine. So barring no public comment, I'd like to go ahead and move.
All right, any questions from or public comment?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Clark, second by Mr. Short. Superintendent, call the roll.
Ms. Perez?
Aye.
Ms. Srivastava?
Aye.
Mr. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Hoover?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Short?
Aye.
Mr. Hui?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, agenda item 12, discussion. Item A, review draft of operational memorandum of understanding between Folsom Cordova Unified School District and New Pacific Institute / New Pacific School, Rancho Cordova. Superintendent.
Yes, on September 8th, 2022, the Folsom Cordova Unified District Board conditionally approved the New Pacific School Rancho Cordova Charter petition. As part of that action to approve the petition, the board directed myself as the superintendent and my staff to negotiate the terms of the operational MOU with the New Pacific School Charter staff. Tonight's is a draft of the MOU that we're still in discussions with the Executive Director of New Pacific School, Dr. Kiefer. But we do have a copy this evening, and if there are any specific questions, Ms. Wessinger can address those questions about the conditions that are in the MOU.
Thank you. Board members, any questions? I just had one thing to identify. Let me just pull it up here. Under conditions, the item 4C. The assessment of student performance and progress testing. Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2, the motion that I made was the comparison would be the average for the K-5 schools within Rancho Cordova, and the average for the Roman numeral 2 for 6 through 8 would be the average for 6-8 schools in Rancho Cordova. I think the way it's worded right now, unless I misread it, it applies to the entire district. But that's the only item that I saw that was inconsistent.
We'll make that correction. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. If there's, this is just discussion, so any public comment? Any public comment online?
No, Mr. Reed.
All right, back to the board. Unless there's any further public comment, we can move on to item B. All right, moving on to item B. Local control funding formula, LCFF supplemental funds analysis. Superintendent.
Yes, this was a request of the board a few meetings back that we have a presentation of the district's budget and specifically the local control funding formula supplemental funds, which are generated by our unduplicated pupil person count in the district. And Mr. Martin has a very thorough presentation he's going to provide tonight with an analysis of how those funds are generated, the revenue, the expenditure, and how we're utilizing those funds to support our unduplicated students. So, Mr. Martin, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Koligian. Actually, this is a very exciting opportunity and topic. When I came on, when I was hired to this district about a year ago, one of the questions I had to write a entry letter about what I believed equity and how that impacts students and student achievement. And so this document and the conversation we're going to have today is specifically tied to that, and you're going to see that throughout this document. And so supplemental funding, I think the entire group is familiar with it at this point, but just for the general audience, supplemental funding is on top of our base allocation. It is generated by the identification of specific students, those that are either socioeconomically disadvantaged or what we used to call free and reduced category, English language learners, and foster homeless youth. And so if a student qualifies into one of those three categories, the reason why we use the term unduplicated is we only get to count them once, but that's where the unduplicated term comes from, very technical in nature. And we then get an additional add-on. Approximately, it's a 20% add-on to our base rate. So it's about $2,000 on the student. It's a 3-year average of our pupil count. And so we normally are around 35% or so. The percentage has actually dropped in the last few years due to COVID, identification, and then universal meals, which has reduced the number of applications we've received for free and reduced because of that, because there's the incentive to fill out that form hasn't been as great. The funding that comes in is then district-wise, locally, we put it in more or less a restricted account and use those funds specifically to target those students. Within that, we also use our local control accountability plan, or LCAP plan, to identify where we will prioritize those funds to help those students or to provide service. So just for example, for this upcoming year that we are currently in, we are receiving approximately right under $14 million, and we have about a $7 million carryover. And that's assuming some specific factors. And then we have about 14.4 million that we have budgeted at adoption budget. There are kind of three areas that help guide us how we're going to prioritize the use of supplemental funds. One is the LCAP, which I just spoke to. We have 4 primary goals that we have identified in our LCAP. You can see those there. I'm not going to spend time going through those, but they really are targeted areas to help with student achievement. Additionally, we have generated what we call our equity questions that we have generated 4 equity-related questions about how we make decisions. Are we thinking about these equity questions throughout our process? These are actually on our agendas, on our executive cabinet, and leadership team. And so we try to ensure that when we're making decisions, are we including these ideas and concepts? Are we reaching out to stakeholders? Are we doing our due diligence to try to help us change how we view our decision-making, right? Trying to be more open-minded and all different areas when it comes to our decision-making process. So those are our equity questions, and I'm sure you guys have seen those before. So. And then third, there is also the state mandate on how supplemental funds should be allocated. So this might be a little new. This is a slide I put together with some information I found from several sources. But really what we want to do is you either want, with supplemental dollars or funds, you want to try to put those dollars directly towards your unduplicated pupils. Now, you're not required to do it 100% to unduplicated pupils. Unlike some other categorical funds, you can do it for the entire population. But if you do that, you kind of see on the right side, you want to make sure that it is principally directed towards unduplicated pupils and that the service is effective for unduplicated pupils. So it can be something that is targeted campus-wide, district-wide on some of the services that we do through our supplemental dollars. But it's important that it has a specific target and principally purposed for our unduplicated pupils, right? And I know I'm going through a lot of stuff here very quickly, but I put all that detail so that you can take the time to take a look and read through that. So one of the things that that we had talked about when I was brought aboard was looking at how we are targeting our supplemental dollars and more or less kind of doing what we would consider internally as a review or an audit of how those dollars are being allocated within the pots. And what we did was we went through all these areas. We worked with curriculum instruction. We worked with our categorical folks. We worked with our EL folks to review these items and kind of look at how we were prioritizing dollars. And did we feel that we either had data to show that or even anecdotally to show that there was principally a purpose of principally being directed towards those unduplicated pupils. And what we found was there were some funding sources and on some activities where we felt like it impacted more of the general population than maybe that concentrated population. And maybe we needed to relook at the allocation formula. So some of these things we either removed completely because we said this was a general service. This really is for all students. And one of the ways we look at it is what is the baseline for all students? What is the district needing to provide for everybody, right? If it's a service for everybody, then it should not be paid out of supplemental dollars. Really, supplemental dollars are those dollars on top of our base allocation, right? That's kind of the easiest way we kind of look at that. And we're actually working on looking at all of our allocation models for staffing at the site level because we really need to decide what is the base level service. If all things being equal, what would we need at every site? And then based off of the student population, what are those extra things above and beyond, right? And that's what supplemental dollars, Title I dollars, things of that nature should be allocated towards. And so what you see here is recommendations from our team saying that rather than 100% of these positions, maybe really it should be 35%, or in some of these allocations, 50%, or none of those funds. Really, this is a general fund need. And all students should be getting this service regardless of your unduplicated status. And therefore, supplemental dollars aren't appropriate to be used in that situation, right? So you see that breakdown there. We broke it out by the goal under the LCAP of how those funds were allocated. And you see some dollars actually are going back into supplemental. We identified some positions that really were being targeted specifically, principally for purposes of unduplicated pupils. And so dollars should be moved into there. And so you see that. And so combined, what we found was we feel there's about a little over $1.4 million that really should probably not be under the supplemental side, should be the unrestricted side. And so moving those expenditures there will then free up dollars that really we can then do enhance even more service with our supplemental dollars for the needs of those students. So, the next slide here just really quickly talks about the fact that what we want to do in the future is also change the model in the sense that we would like to allocate an allocation on a per pupil basis, unduplicated pupil allocation basis to each individual site. The previous methodology we have done as a district is when a site had a need and it seemed to fit supplemental, we would go ahead and allocate some resources. But what can happen in that is inequities can occur, right? Because often it's based off of the request, right? Especially at the district level, we don't know all the needs of all of our sites, right? We don't know the specifics. And so one site might say, I really need some additional time to support attendance, right? Attendance is a huge issue for our unduplicated pupils. We need someone who can make phone calls and verify where kids are, help them get their vaccinations or other documents necessary to get them in the class, right? And so we will provide something, but the issue that we come up with is another school site just down the street might have that same need, but they may not know to ask, or they might have a different way of allocating that service or need. And so this is where imbalances can occur in those allocation models. And so what we want to do, again, is create a baseline. Everybody gets a set amount. And then what we want to do is give extra resources, dollars to those sites so that then they can prioritize where their needs are. Maybe they don't need it for an attendance clerk, but then they should have some resources, some other resources. Maybe they're short in intervention time or some other service, right? And so we want to allow that customization of the specific need of that student population. And one way we can do that is to allocate dollars directly to the site, similar to Title I dollars. Yeah. Title I is allocated to the site, and then they use their SIPSA plan to then identify their priorities with their site council. They make goals, and then within the LCAP goals, and then dollars are allocated to either staff, services, intervention, professional development, whatever it may need to be done. And what we would like to do is use our supplemental dollars to do it that way. So we're stepping back. We're going to step into this model. This will be new for this next year. But what we would like to do is the dollars we've freed up, along with dollars we're already allocating to the sites, we can then generate a pool and do a more or less a per student allocation to the site and allow them to help prioritize the needs. Now, obviously, we still want to vet those things to ensure that they're in compliance, that they prioritize the needs of unduplicated pupils, all of those pieces, just like we do with Title I. But it would be, and then they can use it in conjunction as well. So they would have supplemental plus Title I, depending on the site, obviously, and be able to combine all of those dollars along with what other resources they have to really prioritize the needs of their pupils. And what we'll be doing is we're also working, just so you guys are aware, we have a data group that we're working on, is to try to have active data that we can give responsive analysis to our teams to let them know, hey, this is working over at this site. This is moving the needle, right? That way we can not only know that the resources are being used appropriately, but then we can recreate that at another school site, right? And where we don't see the moving of the needle or making that change for student populations and what the needs are for those students, then we can pull back at that site, right, and balance those things out. And so that's part of this process as well. And so this is what we're aiming to do in 23-24. It may take a year or two to get all the bugs hooked out, worked out on these types of allocations, because this will be the first time we will do this. But we haven't finalized how the allocation model will work. But one of the things we're looking at is probably a tiered system. There'd be probably a base level of funding, because you need a minimum level of supplemental funds to provide some level of intervention or support service. So we have to have a base level. So even if your number may be low, we want to make sure that there's enough that will actually make a difference at your site. But then beyond that, similar to how we have supplemental and concentration funding, when your population grows, when you go from maybe 30% of your population to 90% of your population are unduplicated pupils, there are just extenuating needs that happen when you start getting a larger and larger population of and that's how the state formula works. So I think in the formula where we will create, we'll probably have some level of tiered funding system. Does that make sense? It's maybe, if you're under 50%, you're $1 amount. If you're over 50%, maybe you're at a higher dollar amount. So that way there are more resources allocated to that connection. So that's what we're looking at. I don't have that formula yet. That's something that's going to take some time for us because we have to look at what our current allocations are. We don't want to harm any school sites that we've allocated services using supplemental dollars to. So we have to figure all of those pieces out. So we have to make it work within what we've already generated to a certain degree. But I think it's important because if we have added at a school site a clerk and some behavior support and all of these things, and we give them their formula and it ends up that they can do continue to do those things, or if they want to enhance something else, they have to prioritize, right? And that's that choice, that decision that's happening at that site level is the goal on that. So any questions on that? And kind of, before I move on, I know that's a big change in the model, in that site allocation component.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Sean. So I just want some clarification on the concentrated funding, not to be confused with concentrated grants, because we're not, as a district, eligible for those, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, we're to access concentration, which is an additional level of funding from the state, you have to have, as a district, over 55% unduplicated, not at a school site, so.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on to that one?
Mr. President, yeah, I would just remind us again, I know we've gone over this a few times, but if a district was at that 55% or over number, what is the additional funding that would come in?
So the percent over 55% gets an additional 65%. It used to be 50%, now it's 65%.
On top of the 20%?
On top of the 20. So you'd more or less, for every student over the 55%, you would get 85% add-on, because it's the 20 plus the 65. Yeah. So it's significant dollars.
Yeah, thanks.
You got it. On the next slide, this is last year's numbers. We don't have this year's numbers or information yet because the seabeds or date, the more or less the identification date that we pull these numbers, because it's a static information, it's in October, so we're not there yet. Just so you also know, we had talked about the fact that we're trying to identify as many of these kids as possible, and we shared that with the elimination of, or not elimination, but with the creation of universal meals for all students, the incentive to complete the free and reduced application form obviously went on the wayside to a certain degree. Now, we are trying to talk to our families about still completing that form because you can get transportation for free, you can get tests for free, like the AP exam, PE clothing for free, you can also get student care for free. And so we're trying to get families and using that as an incentive tool, and we're working with our communications team, working with our categorical EL team, all of these folks to try to communicate that out. And we actually have a packet out that we're sending out to all of our sites to try to call families and follow up. But the truth is we know that the percentages up there and the counts are underreporting of our true need and of our students, right? And so we want to try to identify every student we can. But as a district, we have about 7,000 students that are unduplicated, right? So as a district, we're right under 35%. But historically, pre-COVID and pre-universal meals, we were higher on all these sites for the most part. So this next slide just kind of shows the, after the recommended changes that we're going to go ahead and make to the supplemental funds, 76% of the funds are directly towards school site staff. Now these are, you can see the list of all the different staff positions. Majority of these positions are at a specific school site. Some of them are also itinerant, meaning they might move from site to site. They might be 2 days a week at one site, or 2 days, and another 3 days at another site. Or they might support a site and they come and do training at one site and then they're at another site on another day. So, or they're there because of the needs of specific students, and then once they're done, they move on to another site. So, but that's kind of I think I captured everything, all the different positions, but you can see there are just a plethora of positions that are supporting students that are paid from these funds. On top of that, we have another 15% of the funding is where it is student or site-based services. So transportation service, instructional materials, you can see all the other lists of activities that are directly activities that are happening at the site level. And then the last about 9% are support staff that are district support staff, but then they go out to sites. So, we have a percentage of our SEL program. One of our bigger costs in there is Kate Azarian's position, which is the social work and the community schools piece. And so a good chunk of her staff is there. Now, eventually when we get the grant, we might be able to move some of her costs. We'll move over to a different pot, but that's an example as well. And so we also have coordinators and instructional specialists that support very specialized programs. And then they also work on differentiating the curriculum we have for unduplicated pupils, or helping with our EL students, or creating curriculum to support the unduplicated students that have additional needs. And so they take the general curriculum that we have and then either add supplements or give additional materials. And so that's a support above and beyond, right? So those are some of the things that we use those dollars with.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Does that list, Sean, does that list include the instructional assistants? I don't see it on here. Maybe I'm...
behavior support aids, what's that? Bilingual aids are paid out of here as well. And I might not have captured all of the positions. These are just some of them, so. Bilingual aids are also paid through this as well, so. Along with Title III dollars and some other pots, so.
Were you thinking about instructional aids for special education?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are, instructional aids for SPED normally are not paid out of this pot. That's special education, right?
Okay, so that's...
So if there was a need to provide, we do have some special ed positions. In fact, you'll see that further on when I break it down by category. There are special ed positions that are paid that are above and beyond the base level. Like if it's an IEP required special ed aid, it wouldn't be able to be here because that's a base level service we have to provide to those students, right? It's remember, the idea of these dollars is after we've done everything, that would be what you would more or less say the base level required components. These are above and beyond, right? This is the frosting on your cake, so to speak, right? I think that's an Elena term. She does cupcakes, but she has the same thing with sprinkles and everything else. So.
Okay. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
You got it. So, and the next couple of slides now, you saw it in the big categories. Now I'm breaking it down by different pots. So by department pots and categories of areas. So the first one, which is obviously the largest, is the site-directed allocations. And you can see the goals specifically tied to that. Here's the list of different projects different staffing. And then you see the allocations by site. Now this is at adopted budget on this allocation here with the adjustments out that I had talked about. But since then, we've already approved some additional services like at Cordova High and some other pieces. So these are as of adopted budget, but you can see the allocations. The reason why Mitchell is the highest at this point is because of the fact that we allocated for the 7th period day. And that's why that one jumped up higher, because we had to hire some additional staff associated with that 7th period day, and that's why it jumped up. Otherwise, Cordova High was easily the highest before that. And then when we actually get to a site allocation model, what we have to figure out is some of the site allocation model, there are district-initiated activities, like the 7th period day. That's not really going to count against Mitchell's allocation, right? Because that was a district initiative. And then, but services beyond that, we would then say, okay, this is your pot, what prioritize when we do the per pupil allocation. So there'll be some kind of district, just like Title I. Title I is very similar in that we have a kind of a district allocation. We reserve for certain district activities that we want to prioritize for our Title I needs, and then we give the rest to the sites. And so we'll do something very similar to that when we get to the final allocation. But you can see down here, but like, for example, Vista del Lago, $1,200 is not going to do very much for you, right? And I think that pays for their some time for their parent coordinator or something like that. But when you go back to this slide, Vista del Lago still has 105 unduplicated pupils. That's a lot of students, right? And that's 1.5% of our total unduplicated pupil population. That's what that last column shows. So what that tells me is we need to make sure they have enough money that they can do something for those kids, right? They need to be able to provide. So that's why we need to have at least a base level allocation, right? Be it 5,000, 10,000, whatever we end up doing with the model. And so at least initially, the model will be a little bit created to put all these factors in, and you're kind of shoehorning the allocation. Ultimately, you would love to have just a straight allocation model that fits all the needs. But because we already have existing programs within those dollars, at least initially, we're going to make a model that works for all the constituents and all the parts. So this is just the allocation. That's the first portion, 44%. Then you see from here, so here's special ed, Chris, is just like you were asking about, I'm sorry, Mr. Clerk. Here's the, here's allocation, but you can see we have behavior specialists, behavior support aides, so there are aides in there, but again, these are above and beyond the base level allocation. Attendance due process, we had Mr. Meyer here talking about the A2A, the attendance, the 30-day challenge on the attendance, those types of things. That definitely targets our unduplicated pupils. There is a direct correlation between the absence rates and our unduplicated pupils, right? And also when we talk about graduation rates and all of the things, absences are a huge, huge immediate indicator of how students are going to achieve and whether or not they're going to graduate, right? And what we see is that also correlates with our unduplicated pupil counts, right? There is a direct correlation between those things. And so targeting attendance, incentives and programs directly affect unduplicated students. That is a targeted piece. And so that's why we allocate some of their department there. Transportation, that one we're still auditing. The allocation dollar amount, I'm not 100% comfortable with. I need to, I have to have a methodology to understand, are we adding extra transportation routes for our unduplicated pupils because of the unduplicated pupil status or for other purposes? I want to be able to tie that out. And so that's something we're auditing. Transportation is just so overwhelmed right now. That's not a department I wanted to put on another thing on their plate right now. But at some point, we're going to be auditing the registrations and the process. Now, right now, unduplicated pupils do not pay for transportation service, right? So there's also that subsidy of the cost that we were allocating out of here as well. So. Instructional materials, you can see there, we have some of our costs regarding some of the assessments. We have some assessment tools that we use district-wide, but we have other pieces where we're using it trying to target specific student testing when it comes to intervention services, when it comes to English language learner services, those types of things. And so we allocated some of those costs there and adjusted it down from what the previous amount was. Health services is a big one as well. We have health clerks and nurse services that their job is to help with clearing wellness issues, attendance issues, vaccinations so that we can get kids in school. When we have students out for an extended period of time, we try to use the nurse services to call with the family, help get medical service, try to get something cleared with the doctor. So they spend a lot of time on those pieces as well. So that's a big piece of it too. Translation services, obviously that goes right along with EL services. So it's translating so that we, again, equitable instruction is how we describe it here. That's also what we were talking about before, where we want to make sure that as students are learning English, that they have the materials that they need that is above and beyond the base level instructional materials we provide, right?
Okay. Mr. President?
Yes.
Sean, just for clarification, how many hours a day do we have our translation services?
You know what? I would have to, 4 hours a day?
So it's 4 hours or 2 hours?
4 hour positions is what I was told.
So what's the point?
We have currently a 4-hour Spanish bilingual translator as the actual position. She does extend her day by 2 hours or as needed, and almost every day she's here longer. Fortunately for us, we do have bilingual aides and guess what, other bilingual staff. So we do try to utilize the staff on the campuses throughout the district, myself and others included. But it is definitely a growing need, continues to be. But yeah, that's the official position.
Spanish the only one that we have? I mean,
no, Spanish is still the greatest demand. Make no, I don't know what the saying is, but there's no debate there on that. But we have Russian, Ukrainian, Pashto, Dari. We have Urdu, Hindi
Armenian.
Translators throughout the district.
Armenian.
We also have Armenian, yes. Thank you.
Actually, on these slides, I have one quick question.
Sure.
I noticed on slide 8, it lists all of our 35 school sites, but on slide 10, we only list 30 of our school sites on allocation of expenses. I'm not sure what all the 5 missing ones, I didn't have time to go back and look, but for example, Innovations Academy is not on slide 10, but was on slide 8.
Right, so they do not receive any allocation at this time.
Why is that?
Well, probably because they're a remote school program, and so we haven't allocated any specific resources. Again, because we don't do a per pupil allocation to the site unless we have a specific request or some need that we would have provided service using supplemental dollars. No supplemental dollars were allocated. That's part of the reason why I was sharing I feel like there is some inequity of allocation of services because of that, right? And so, and Innovations is new program as well, right? And so that's probably part of it as well. They haven't spoken to a need for specific intervention service or something that we had spoken to about specifically unduplicated pupils. Normally what I'll be honest, when it comes to it at this point, it's we identify a need, we identify that it's unduplicated pupils with that need, and then we say, oh, we can use supplemental for it. That's why we're wanting to change the model, because we know there are unduplicated pupils there. We want to get those resources to that site so then they do have access to them to provide some level of service to those students.
So then those five schools in particular would not, at least currently, do not receive any supplemental.
They may receive service through some of these department allocations.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure they get some bilingual service, things like that, but they're not specifically allocated to their site. It's probably an itinerant position.
Yeah.
So they probably do get service related to it. Like SEL, I know they're probably getting SEL, Ayana, Dr. Pease does training with all the school sites. They go in and do service provided, but it's coded under Dr. Peace's department. It's not coded under the site allocation. Does that make sense? So they are getting services through supplemental dollars, but it's not being allocated directly. This is broken down by budget code. So for me, this means that I know that person is there 100% of the time for however many hours a day, and that's how I can break this out. I don't have a way to timesheet Dr. Peace's team and say, okay, I charge a quarter of it, $10 here and $40 there.
Yeah.
So that's why on this slide, at least, you're not seeing a specific allocation to that site level.
Okay. And I hate to keep on mentioning Innovations Academy, but again, it's the only one that jumped off my.
Sure.
Yeah, because I see on Innovations Academy, there's 110 unduplicated, and they're not receiving anything. But for example, Vista Lago has 105, less unduplicated than Innovations Academy, and they are receiving some. So it's just something I thought was interesting to point out.
And we recognize that as well. That's why that's per student allocation would change. Now, I will tell you, like with Innovations, for example, their population last year, their enrollment this year is half of what it was last year, right? So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Sure.
But another one is the non-public schools. So one of the items is SPED right above Innovations is our non-public school placement. Well, we don't actually allocate supplemental dollars to that, but we have students in those programs at those sites. So there will be some where you won't be able to provide service to, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it?
Yep. Thank you.
Continuing on, social emotional learning, we were just talking about SEL, this Dr. Peace's team. Strategic initiative supports, that is Ms. Hazarian's team that we just talked about. We charge a bigger chunk because she really is targeting unduplicated pupils with the community schools and the services that she's providing, along with some of the attendance work that she did with Mr. Meyer's department. Preschooling, we provided some additional supports there, and then testing services there. This next slide just really kind of shows since the program, supplemental funding dollars have been received in 13-14. You can see kind of how our revenues and the expenditures have gone. In 17-18, and I don't have specifics on this level of detail. I mean, I can look it up if there were specific questions, but for the most part, in the last few years, other than in 2021, we've been relatively close to spending. I think what we have done historically is budgeted what the award was. And because there are people and extra time and travel, what ends up happening is not all the funds get spent, just like we normally have in a lot of our other budgets, and then the money falls out. What we're trying to do is, and we went into this year specifically trying to do this, is budget activities above and beyond the award, right? Because we know that some of that money is going to fall back and not get spent, and then at least at a minimum, we spend our full award amount. Now, we do have a significant ending fund balance of over $7 million, right? But we always have to remember those are one-time dollars, right? So what we want to do is be inventive in the methodology that you use those dollars. So what you use those things for is maybe we enhance a program but we know we're only going to spend $1 million of it. So you can do it for 5 or 6 years, right? And then hopefully by that time that you need to wean off, you then have extra dollars coming in because over time you have COLAs and everything else that growth, and then you can absorb it into the ongoing budget, right? So that's one way you can. Another thing is you can upfront some large capitalized items that maybe a big a rollout initiative where you would have a ton of professional development. You've got to buy some materials or whatever the case may be up front. And so you do this big onboard, onset kind of program, and then the ongoing cost dwindles down because once you train everybody up, once you do that, now you only need to train a few employees every year, right? Those types of things. But also I would say, right now we know the need is very great. That is why we have learning loss dollars as well. So I think what we also need to look at is in conjunction with our learning loss dollars, and we're working with our teams on this. And so I'm not I don't want to get too far ahead on this, but I think what we have to do is say, we have some serious needs out in our community for our students, right? Now, we only have them within the school day, but we know they have needs that go way beyond that. And that's where that community school component is coming in. So we have the community school part component. We have ELOP coming in now, which is a 9-hour day, right? So we have a lot of these wraparound support systems. We also have this money. We also have learning loss money. We need to be inventive. We need to be creative. We need to think outside the box on some of these things, but also we need to know we need bodies. We need bodies for people, right? And that's been the hardest thing is we just we can't get the folks in at this point. And we know that this is across the country, right? So so that'll be part of it too, is how do we get all of these pieces together and then use those dollars. So, but also what the extra dollars allow us to do is do exactly what I said initially, which is budget for greater than what the award is. And then that way, if we go under, that's fine. If you go over, you have reserves to be able to allow for that. So that's some of those things. So we're going to be, as a team, I know we're going to be working on a lot of initiatives that we'll be providing. We had also with the board, the Rancho Cordova kind of think tank ideas of what we're going to do for the future. Some of these dollars can be allocated for that purpose. Majority, let's be honest, the majority of our population, if you go back to this slide, the majority of our population, if you break it down by sites, Rancho Cordova is 65%, right? Folsom is 15%. So the majority of the unduplicated dollars really go to those side of the sites. So there's definitely an ability to use those dollars to allocate that, and that's in that bottom right kind of corner there. So, so where are we at this point? Still need to finalize a couple of sections. I'll be honest, I want to specifically speak to one person in my team, specifically Connie Bisbee, who is our financial data analyst, has when she got that position earlier this year, I tasked her with deconstructing the supplemental budget and putting this together. And so the majority of the information you're seeing there is from the work that she's doing. So I just want to really recognize her work. The entire team is amazing, but Connie has really taken that on, and without her time and commitment, we wouldn't have this level of detail and data. So I really want to appreciate and value her and her time. I want to say we have a couple other areas that we're working on. Health services, we're working with Carrie Kay's department to try to identify. The problem is with COVID, everybody got shuffled everywhere. And so what we're really trying to identify is within the health services, where are they at? What sites? Are they still doing the service related to that above and beyond service, or are they doing baseline service? Because I tell you right now, during COVID, they were just doing baseline service, right? We were just covering what we had to when it came to COVID. Now that we're getting back, are we shifting those priorities to the unduplicated pupils? Because we want to make sure those dollars go to that purpose. The other thing we need to do is we're going to update the numbers with the changes that we reflected. That will happen at first interim here. So in December, you guys will see all those revised numbers. But we also have to recognize that you're shifting cost to the unrestricted general fund of about 1.4 million that was in the supplemental pot. Now, supplemental is within the unrestricted general fund, but we've locally reserved it. So that, we've more or less put restrictions on it ourselves. And so by doing that, that does take away unrestricted dollars in essence to move that around. So we have to be aware of that as well. We had a very large settlement. We have a lot of other pieces that we need within this district. So, we have to be cognizant of all of these pieces when we're moving the puzzle around. But the allocation formula is going to be huge. It also incentivizes the sites to identify their students, to get out there and make those phone calls, because they would get direct dollars for their program. And they can also incentivize the families to complete the form, because if they know Mrs. Smith or the campus monitor or the counseling services that my child gets are directly tied to those dollars by completing that form, that will incentivize them, I think, to complete that form as well, right? Because they see the value of it directly to their child. So that'll be important as well. Carryover funds, we talked about that we need to work on targeting those funds. And then the way this will roll out is we'll run this through our cabinet team, all of our team there. Then we'll bring it to budget advisory and then to the board as part of the budget process for next year. And so you guys will all see the formula allocation, all of those pieces. And we've already started preliminary. We're actually going out to every school site, talking about budget, talking about these changes, prepping them now, explaining budget now, so that in January, when we come out to build 23-24's budget, we're going to bring HR, we're going to go through and we're going to look at the whole thing, right? This is a holistic idea of this is your campus. Here's your baseline staff. Here's your other pots of money. What are we doing for kids? Curriculum will be there. We're going to work through that together, right? And if a campus has a lot of special ed services, those kind of things, we'll have Betty Jo's team. We'll have, we're trying to do this as a team, right? This is all the pieces at a site together. So, and then we'll update the LCAP.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm assuming, Ms. Cabrera, that this information will be passed on as part of the parent summit? Or are you going to have some of this information? Okay. Yeah, because I want to make sure those parents know about it. So, okay, thank you.
All right. Other board questions?
I have a couple. So one of my questions was, do you anticipate that our supplementing funding balances will continue to increase as they have in the past couple of years?
So for this year, we had originally budgeted about $1 million over our award. So I was not anticipating that. Now we've moved $1.4 million out. So there is a chance that for this year, the ending fund balance may fall out and we may increase some, but long-term, the plan is that we're going to come to you as a board and bring you a plan that's going to be spending down those dollars. So we're working on a plan to get those dollars spent down so that you really want to use this year's dollars on this year's students, right? That's what the goal will be. But we've built up a reserve to such a level, especially with COVID. You saw over $2 million of it came from just this last, 2 years ago. And so we have to be, as we said, because it's one time, we want to be targeted with the dollars, because we don't want to say, okay, let's add 10 people with this $7 million, and then once the $7 million is gone, then we have to cut. So we want to make sure that we do it in a way that kind of smooths it out over the time.
And then I just had one other question. So when the charter schools are implemented into our district, does the supplemental funding for those students does it move with the students into the new charter school, or how does that work?
So if our funding is based off of our student population, so if our students leave and go to to the charter school, then those dollars will go with that student. Okay. Yes.
Okay. And then, so our allocation will not include the charter schools. It'll just be.
Correct. They're independent financially from us in that way, so we won't actually see them on our books at all.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I have a few.
Yes.
And if it's okay, I'll probably have comments and questions mixed in together rather than holding off till the end. Thanks for this report, and I know you recognize your staff, but I know it's probably been a lot of work to get this together, and we have a long way to go with it still, so appreciate that, especially knowing we've had a lot of other things on our plate over this past year. So thank you, Mr. Martin. So really just a few questions and a couple comments. Our supplemental funding, as I understand it, is used to improve achievement for our unduplicated students specifically. And I appreciate this report. And also want to kind of make clear that my goal, even in talking about supplemental, isn't necessarily to measure where every dollar goes, though I think it's really important work, and I'm glad that we're doing it. My goal is more to measure the outcomes of the use of our supplemental funding for our unduplicated students. So those are what my questions will revolve around. One is with this carryover. I know we talked a little about some ideas of what we're going to be doing with it, but we're still kind of dreaming that up a little bit, it sounds like. I just want to ensure, is the allocation of funding going to be based on easily identifiable outcomes for our unduplicated students?
At least preliminary, the funding allocation will be based off of just your numbers, right? I don't think we've gone far enough in the conversation to say you get more dollars or less dollars, if that's what you're meaning, because of the outcome. Of the result is if your outcome improves, great. We want to recreate that elsewhere, I think is what we want to do, right?
No, and maybe I didn't say that quite right, and I appreciate the clarification.
No,
yeah, because not quite, I think, what I'm trying to communicate there. It's more, we're going to be utilizing some of this carryover money, and I want to ensure that we're able to actually identify, is the money that we're using going towards the purpose that we're using it for?
Oh, yeah.
So I guess the question is are we going to have those outcomes available before we allocate the money, or an idea of how we're going to measure those outcomes?
Sure, I understand. I would probably defer to curriculum and instruction on that, or Elena on that, but I think we are. Similar to Title I dollars or any other source, we track the dollars specifically in a local resource. We know where the dollars are going, and then I think we can, maybe you guys want to speak to that a little bit.
Just as a quick little background, the LCAP, which is the supplemental dollars, has what's known as local indicators, and there's metrics tied to each one of those. So it's things like CASP, language arts, math. It's things like attendance. It's disciplines such as suspension and graduation rates, just to name a couple. So all of those are things that we're measured on annually. And so when we direct services, we have to, in the LCAP, we have to link them through those metrics. And then we have to put what's called growth, if you will, growth targets in each year. And so we do have to respond every year for the dashboard, which becomes a public, that should be coming. And it will show where our growth has been made, where our areas of, additional focus is needed. So to answer your question, as we design these actions in the LCAP, and when we hire people or when we buy materials or provide professional development, we do directly do an analysis as part of the not only cabinet but with educational partners and look to see what is the best practice. And so that's what we have to measure it against. So during the dashboard, we'll get to look at it at a greater, with a greater focus. You'll recall the last years, there's been some suspension of test scores and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So there has been some gaps in that, but we have seen graduation rates. We've seen A through G participation and the like.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the LCAP, I guess one of the questions I have with that, and I do realize that the LCAP is kind of the place where we do measure these outcomes. On something, let's say like Goal 4, which seems to be fairly related to all of our supplemental, so Goal 4's student progress and educational outcomes will be monitored to increase and improve success with an emphasis on historically marginalized and our most vulnerable student populations. And you will know this much better than I, because I'm sure you have looked at that LCAP 1,000 times more than I have. I'm wondering, on that Goal 4, do we disaggregate our goals or our, the sub goals? I suppose you can help my language on there. To show specifically our unduplicated students. So when we talk about college and career readiness.
Those are excellent questions. Absolutely. We break it down by what we call demographic data. And I like to take what sometimes seems complicated and simplify it a little bit. So I look at the kind of kid that we have and so that could be ethnicity or grade level or the kind of program the students are in. So such as Title I or special ed. So we look at if you look at our metrics, especially in Goal 4, 4.1 is language arts, 4.2 is mathematics, 4.3 is English learners. So you can see that, and embedded within those areas of focus are the data that we pulled from whether, like I said, CASP, LPAC, graduation, A through G, et cetera.
Yeah, and those are broken down specifically for unduplicated students or other measurements. And I don't know if I'm looking at a different document. I think I'm looking at the parent summary. That's probably not the name of it. Under there, it only shows me, I think, the baseline, and it looks like it's a district-wide percentage. Is there a different place just where I'm not seeing it?
Yes,
Okay.
And just usually I would remember the page numbers, but I don't right now.
Fair enough.
On Goal 1, the first section is, on Goal 4 is the area you're talking about.
Okay.
The very first part of that LCAP will say metrics, and embedded within there are a long list of different data that's measured. Every goal has different metrics that are required, if you will, as directed by the local indicators from CDE.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I get, and that's, thank you for answering that. I mean, that's the main thing I want to make sure is that any of the supplemental that we're using is actually achieving those outcomes for our unduplicated students. I know district-wide we have a lot of measurements, but and it's really important to me at least that money is actually going towards the achievement that we're looking for our unduplicated students. So is the LCAP then would be where we'd measure just on a year-to-year basis those things like CASP, like college and career readiness indicators, like graduation rates?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I wanted to add one more thing too with regard to the measures. There's a specific area on in the LCAP, which is about principally directing those dollars to ELLI or English learners, low-income students, and it's listed the different activities that are directed to specifically move that needle for those students, where we have to identify whether there may be an achievement gap or performance gap, an outcome gap of whatever, could be attendance or something. So in there, not only is a metric included in the goal, but there's a specific section that details out the activities that are directed at remedying any gaps that we see.
Yeah, perfect.
Can I bring up one more indicator too? And we saw this more before COVID, but the dashboards that were available were the colored charts, if you recall, and the vertical, one side was growth, one side was status. And we had it broken down by every school and every demographic breakdown. Yeah, and what we saw from year to year was, were we moving from red to orange, or orange to yellow, or yellow to blue, or green, and green to blue. And then tracking, what that growth was from year to year. Now, because we haven't given, the state assessment during COVID, it kind of threw a little wrench into that. But I think that's probably the easiest way to explain and to see graphically and to describe to the public, what are the metrics and how are we doing, for those unduplicated students and by schools that are generating those dollars. So we know we're keeping an eye on the state right now, because right now they're just saying those charts are going to measure status, and eventually it'll bring growth back in too. But that's another indicator that I think would answer that question as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ms. Cabrera, for that answer. And just for the fact that we are tracking this. I know it's been difficult the last couple of years because of all of the testing. The last question I have, Mr. Martin, would be, you mentioned a couple of times where we are still working on this. There's a few things that we're still trying to nail down. I don't remember if you did have it on here. Do we have a time frame for when this would come back to us again with the updated information?
So the plan at this point is that we're working on the site allocation for the 23-24 budget cycle. So we'll be bringing it to the Budget Advisory Committee. Our first meeting there will be in January after the state budget comes out from the governor. So we would probably bring that to them with a draft. By then we should have all the rest of the areas audited and created a formula at that point. So we're looking at around that time to bring it to them. And then we would want to probably right around that same time sunshine it with the board, because we want to be able to very quickly start having meetings with the school sites to start talking about, here's your allocation of supplemental combined with what other pots you have, and let's start working. So I would anticipate, I have to look at the timeline and when the Budget Advisory Committee is in January, but we probably would have you guys take a look at it around that same time. So that you're both kind of looking at it around the January-ish window, January, February, somewhere in there. Because we have to have it in place in time for the start of the next school year. Okay? Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, public comment. Welcome.
Stan Jones, Rancho Cordova parent. Now Cordova High School. 2 years, a year ago, and then 2 years before that, I was a member of the Mills Middle School Site Council when we underwent a state audit from the State Department of State Department, that's where I worked, State Department of Education, and I represented parents at the school on the advisory committee during that audit. One of the things that was asked of us is the Title I funds. This is the state auditor saying that Title I budgets for school district expenses should originate from site councils, and that they need to take leadership in that responsibility. I don't think we knew about it at our site council as parents at that time, and me as a parent representative. So I'm wondering if, and it was, I believe I saw it in Ed Code that it refers that. Now, you talked about the district taking an allocation from its sources, multiple sources, and then deciding what you're going to do at the district level, and then you're going to pass a residual to the individual schools, which would get back to Mills Middle School, where I was the parent representative at the time. So if that is the case in Ed Code, and if they articulated it to us and I understood it correctly, then it sounds like I wonder when the, I'm being beeped. I'm wondering when and how the site councils get involved in that process, so that the input from that organization at each school, not just picking on Mills, that's just where I was, so I'm only talking about the fact I know. So I just wonder how that works into the planning for those expenditures. So if we're supposed to be doing something to follow Ed Code for site council, that we are doing that not just at any one school, but for the district. And I didn't hear anything back from that from Ms. Cabrera or others who, there was no feedback coming back to us. The audit was then done. So anyway, that's my my question, that if we're supposed to be included. Anyway.
Maybe Superintendent, we can have someone follow up on that.
We can do that.
Okay.
And I believe you're talking about the FPM audit, the federal audit of Title I.
Right, yes, the federal audit that was conducted by the state representing the federal government in California.
Okay. We'll follow up.
And it's mostly that we're addressing that, not necessarily that you tell me. I would be interested in what maybe we should have done or should be doing, but the most important thing is, are we going forward doing the right things that way and are part of the process of including parents? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, public comment?
So this is, sorry, excuse me, thank you. Jen Tarbox. Kind of more of a question, because I'm something I'm not really sure about. So with the funds that are directed for the unduplicated pupils and stuff, I understand it's a variety of different areas, right? Whether it's language, English speaking or whatnot, but there's also the group of students who don't show up to the classroom. It's discouragement, right? I'm not on a college track. I'm not going to go to university. What's the point? Why do I care about A through G? That is a huge population of our students, to be honest. Not every one of these students has a parent at home pushing them to go anyway, right? Some of these funds, and I can't help but think, like when we talk about the charters or this or that, it's about programs that we offer in our schools for our kids. Could those funds ever be used to create a sort of trade graduation program? For example, I took auto shop at Bella Vista High School. That was a science, right? Like, for some of these kids, they're not thinking about college. So showing up in the classroom is not necessarily a top priority for them. But if we offered some sort of certificated graduation program where when they're out of high school, they can go straight into a trade. I mean, I don't know because I hadn't thought about it till I was listening to this, but if that's directed towards the areas, like if we start with Cordova areas, for example, having programs like that for the unduplicated students, that it's more about the lack of what their interest of what they're going to do after, this might keep some of them on campus and motivated and feeling good. And it's just another way, get them to use their hands and to be into something and have a trade. It's just something I thought about, I wanted to share because I'm not really sure where that falls in, but I kind of feel like that can fall in somewhere to offer these programs so that we don't need to lose students to other, charters or anything else to other programs. We can keep them here by using some of those funds to offer what they need within our own district. I mean, that's one of my thoughts.
That's
Thank
a
you.
really, may I just respond? That's a really good point, and that's why we have invested in college and career, technical education, CTE courses. We have 18 industry sectors throughout the district, and we have many students who are involved in those pathways that earn them certification. So if they wanted to go straight from high school to work, they could, or high school to college with some background experience. But that's something that, you know, we're always looking at and trying to grow too, with interest from the community and our students. You know, what are these business sectors? We were just at a Folsom Economic Development meeting this morning, and the health industry that's rolling into Folsom and the I-50 corridor is huge. And, you know, preparing our students for a future, you know, in allied health careers or medical health careers is, you know, something that we've started at Cordova High School and something we'll probably want to continue to grow.
Thank you. Any comments from online? All right, back to the board.
Mr. President?
Yep.
So, Sean, just trying to understand this. If a site, is it a site's getting these supplemental dollars, is it based on them proactively reaching out to the district staff and petitioning for these dollars with a specific program, or what's the process for that?
Currently, or what we were changing it to?
Both.
So currently, I think needs have been identified through a discussion with the site or through the principals communicating to the cabinet team, identifying needs
And
through
the school site councils.
school
and
site council,
SIPSAs,
yeah. And then when we make the LCAP, we prioritize needs, saying that we want to reach out certain when it comes to student achievement or English language learners, and we want certain, and that's, you know, part of that LCAP process. So that's how all the activities have been identified to this point. But there hasn't been any kind of direct allocation to a site to say, here are the LCAP goals. You have some dollars. You prioritize where you want those dollars. And a lot of sites can use it, well, not a lot, but the higher need unduplicated sites can use it in conjunction with their Title I dollars. And then they could even have a more robust, potentially, program. And so that's the goal that we're recommending, is to do that via site allocation, so.
So the new process would be, so again, how would the money be allocated though? Would it be a request, proactive, or would it be
So there would be
equitable?
some district-generated priorities through the LCAP process, right, that we would then fund using supplemental dollars. That we would have a pot, though, that would then be allocated to the site, similar to the 45% that was very specific site allocated. And we would allocate some of those resources along with the additional funds that we've moved expenditures from, and then say, however the formula is generated, right, on a per pupil basis, say it's $1 a student, right? You have 100 students, you get $100. Here's your $100. Now within the LCAP goals and direction of our equity questions and everything else, how are you going to use those dollars at your site to improve your unduplicated pupils, test scores, and educational experience, all that kind of stuff. That's the intent.
And so with that, is one of the goals going to be making the allocation per site more equitable, would you say? Is that going to be?
Well, I think there's a
something
minimum level that every site needs to have, but I do think it will make it more equitable in the sense that if you have more students, you're getting a appropriate proportion of the dollars, yes.
You're right, because when we go to like page 8, obviously, I mean, I think it's relatively proportionate to the sites with the most unduplicated pupil percentages, but there certainly are some disparities there, right? So, you know, I just wonder if, you know, that, and I think this would require a lot of accountability on the part of the district to oversee this, right? But, you know, if there's a way to make that more equitable amongst the sites, essentially, you know, making sure that the sites that have the most unduplicated pupils, you know, get the most funding. But yeah, no, I look forward to continuing this conversation. I think it's really important, and I appreciate you putting this together with your team. So
All right, well, this was just for discussion. So, hearing no other comments, we'll move on to agenda item 13, information, 2022-2023 Student and Family Services Action Plan Executive Summary. Superintendent.
Yes, we put this here as an information item. This, what we're calling the Student Services and Family Plan, is formerly known as the Transformative Social Emotional Learning Plan that we heard the summary of at the end of last year, the T-Cell Action Plan. And we've broadened that umbrella now and to make it inclusive now of not only SEL, social emotional learning, but also equity, attendance, and our partnership with community schools. So it's a broader umbrella now. So this executive summary takes into account many of the things we saw in the Transformative SEL Action Plan last spring, but it also incorporates a lot of the metrics that we're seeing now with our attendance and due process. The 20-day challenge is in here, and we just received some really exciting news that our attendance rates overall in those first 20 days have increased by 1% overall, but almost 3% in our Title I schools. And that's just hot off the press. So, you know, that's the kind of metric that we're looking for when we're making those investments. But that's part of the action plan that's listed in here, as well as all the trainings that we're doing with our curriculum for SEL, our second step, our base curriculum, how we're measuring it with the Panorama tool. But it's what you saw in the spring, but it's even more than that, and it's an executive summary. So it's here for your information.
So this is just information. I will entertain any comments if someone wants to say anything on it.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
Just actually reading through it, I just made a couple of notes, couple of questions I want to ask. And well, a comment I want to make. I'm glad that we are actually addressing, looking at working with UCAN and going to the HBCUs to recruit. Count me in. I'd love to go with you guys and see what we can do as far as recruiting, you know, teachers that reflect the community, especially in Rancho Cordova. Now the questions. One time we had a SIG-DISC committee. What happened to it?
Our SIG-DISC committee, I'm going to ask Ms. Wessinger to see if we have reinvigorated the SIG-DISC committee, or what are we, I think that's under differentiated assistance as we're working with Sacramento County Office of Education. But do we have other committees that have now absorbed that?
We're not in significant disproportionality, so we don't have a SIG-DISC committee. However, we have the special ed committee, which I believe you're on.
Yes.
And so any of our conversations about disproportionality would take place in the special ed committee.
Okay. And I can't remember, do we have students on that committee?
No.
Okay, so maybe moving
We're
forward
holding it after school.
In December when we do our little thing that we can.
Okay.
Maybe somebody from SAB to get them on board, just to, you know, kind of listen to them as well. The other question I had is, I read up on this SMARTY goal thing. How are we going to measure these goals? Is there anything in place for that? The SMARTY. Good Lord Jesus, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, and there are many, there's 4 goals here,
Right.
and those goals represent really those 4 areas that are coming straight out of our LCAP. So there's a lot of overlap with our LCAP.
Okay.
So the data lives in the LCAP, but also our vital signs and those metrics that we talked about earlier. The attendance, you know, obviously we're tracking attendance on a weekly basis.
Right.
With our SEL curriculum, now that we have it in place, we're measuring it with Panorama, and we're doing the surveys. We did the student, staff, and parent surveys last year, so we'll see more of that. And then we're doing a lot with restorative practices. This really falls into goal 4, and looking at not only attendance but discipline data. And what kind of interventions are we putting in place in Tier 1 and Tier 2 before we go to a suspension? So we rely on Power School to a great extent to pull that data and examine it with our school leaders. And we're doing that with a professional development training with the Hannigans, the Don't Suspend Me training.
Right.
So we're looking at those metrics as well for alternatives to suspension. So there's many different metrics, but a lot of that overlaps with LCAP.
So the same with monitoring our improved conditions for marginalized students. Will that cross over with the LCAP goals?
It will, because we have to disaggregate those data groups, and we're doing gender too, Mr. Reed.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
I just have one question related to the Hannigan training. Dr. Clegan, how are we affirming that sites are continuing with that program and trying to implement it in their alternatives to suspensions?
The Don't Suspend Me training. Dr. Huber, do you want to talk a little bit about we have a lot of training coming up, and how are we ensuring all the sites are participating and using it?
Yeah, that's basically just in terms of, everybody coming to those trainings, right? And so there's a sign-in sheet. We track all the schools that come to the training. And then there are some schools that we're reaching out to particularly to provide extra support for as well. But basically, that's almost month to month as we look at our discipline data and the types of referrals from classrooms, et cetera. So they'll be ongoing over the course of the entire year. But at this point, a portion of it is simply, having the schools show up for that training and then taking that back to their school sites.
And then past the training, because what if they attend the training and then don't actually implement it into the school site? How are we monitoring that, things are actually changing?
From the data.
Okay.
So exactly. So week to week, month to month, the type of incidents happening on campus and whether or not students are being referred out of classrooms, et cetera, that would tell us whether or not we're having the impact where we want. Okay. And if not, then we'd have to have some conversations in terms of, what's not working? Why is it not working? What barriers are still in our way that are preventing success? Because we know the program's successful from other schools that have implemented it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to agenda item 14, Superintendent's Report. Superintendent.
Yes, I forgot to mention on this last executive summary, I did want to acknowledge Dr. Peace, Ms. Hazarian, and Mr. Meyer for putting that report together and their leadership in this area and really their partnership and collaboration and the work they're doing. And they're doing that in conjunction with our whole community schools, whole child design efforts too. And that's an exciting front that we'd like to bring future reports to the board about how that's developing as well. This is our planning year. We were at a training this week with many other districts throughout the northern part of the state. Some have already implemented, but I think it was a good chance for our cross-sectional team of people that we brought to really find out how to access the needs of the community and our schools and our students to create hubs that are really going to meet the needs of our students and maybe areas we haven't done so in the past, and also better meet the needs of our marginalized students. So I did want to mention that. I did want to also mention this coming week, we have 2 events on our calendar. We have the candidates night, so those board members, candidates that are running for board seats, we're going to have an informational session with district staff, and then we'll have principals from our elementary, middle, high school, and alternative sites there as well. That's Tuesday night, September 27th, 4:30 to 6 here at the ESC. And then we have District Advisory Committee Thursday, September 29th, and that's 4 to 5:30, also here at the district, but we all offer that virtually as well. So those events are coming up as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, agenda item, let's see, 15, board member reports. We'll start over with board member Perez.
So lately, Ray and I have been discussing future SAB agenda items to propose at our next SAB meeting on October 5th. Our representatives have also taken a look at our new sexual harassment flyers that should be posted around campus, hopefully soon. I'm also very glad to have organized a group photo of a few of our Latinx students and educators around campus in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. And I am also very looking forward to next week at Cordova High and our student government class that will begin our homecoming week. Thank you.
Thank you. Board member Srivastav.
Yeah, so I just wanted to recognize a student at Vista del Lago, Rishabh Umbaveneker, who built a brain-computer interface that helps stroke victims communicate. And today he was interviewed on Good Morning America for his accomplishments. He's being recognized as one of the 100 promising teenagers in the Rise Global Scholars Program. So congratulations to him. I also wanted to comment that I unequivocally stand with the rights of our transgender students to use the locker rooms and restrooms that correspond with their gender identity. It can be extremely isolating for transgender youth to not be able to use their preferred public facilities. And I'd also like to emphasize that data indicates that 82% of transgender individuals have considered suicide and 40% have attempted suicide, and our transgender students deserve support from the district and the community at large. And other than that, I hope to see you all at Vista's homecoming game tomorrow night. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Hui?
None for me tonight.
Okay. Board Member Short?
No report. I guess we're going to do advanced planning. We'll talk there.
Oh, did I skip that? I did skip. No, I didn't skip that.
that's-
Yeah, no, that's
I'll
next.
talk. Okay.
That's going to be next. Yeah, sorry. You got me worried there. Board Member Clerk?
Yes. I thoroughly enjoyed my visit, and the list is kind of long. Theodore Judah, Sutter Middle. I'll get back to Sutter Middle in a minute. Peter J. Shields, Cordova Garden, Cordova Villa, White Rock, Williamson, Mitchell Mills, Cordova High, Adult Ed, and Walnut Wood. Sorry about that, Mr. President. But hopefully, Principal McFall is listening. Go Cardinals, and if the Cardinals lose, I will be wearing a Dodger jersey at our next board meeting. So go Cardinals. So I just had to put that in. I want to thank Vista Del Lago's PTSO for inviting me out to Vista's homecoming parade yesterday. Had a great time hanging out with the students and the parents. And actually, believe it or not, that's it. I will be at Cordova next week. I'm excited to judge the floats at the homecoming festivities. And I will actually be at the game. Unfortunately, I will not be at the Vista game as I will be celebrating my own class reunion. Don't ask how many years, because it'll seem ancient to you. No, double that. Anyway, that's it for me.
Board Member Hoover?
Not much tonight. Had the opportunity to judge be a judge for this Battle of the Bands the other night at the Folsom Amphitheater, where it was mostly a lot of our students from a number of high schools battling to participate in next month's Folsom Americana concert at the rodeo grounds. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to the band that won, which they were phenomenal. So go Instagram them or look them up or something. But their name was Average Royalty, and they're all students they're brothers from Folsom High and Sutter Middle School. So they were fantastic, and you can catch them live on October 22nd at the rodeo grounds for the Folsom Americana Fest. So that'll be a fun one to see. That's it for tonight.
All right. Let's see. I have no report for this evening. So that will move us on to advanced planning, item 16. Any update? Oh, actually, item A, next board meeting is October 6th, 2022. 12-month calendar is there for your review, and then suggested future agenda items. Just one observation I see is we got one item removed tonight, but it looks like we're going to have 3 items removed next board meeting, so that's exciting. But any update that the superintendent you want to provide on this?
There is one update. It's actually the one at the top of the list there that the board asked us to revisit the elementary school boundaries last January, and we were planning to do that this fall. So we had slated that for coming up. However, that was before we made the decision to establish full-day kindergartens throughout the district. So we still are going to be adding the schools in Folsom for a full-day kinder, as well as expanding TK classrooms, which again, were not on the radar back last January. So I think what we need to do is reevaluate the capacity once we add those additional classrooms to our campuses to see what space is available for any movement or boundary changes. There'll probably be minor tweaks, but the bigger movements will probably be south of 50 as we are establishing boundaries between Mangini Ranch Elementary and the second Mangini Ranch Elementary, which we'll be bringing forward that name at the next meeting. But that one, I would recommend that we probably put that off till fall 2023, working with Mr. Washburn. I think that's probably a time we'll have a better idea of how many classrooms are being utilized at all of our elementaries, and then what room we have to tweak at those schools where we thought we might be a little heavy and some that might still be light in enrollment.
I think that makes sense. Is the board fine with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, so board members, anything you want to see added?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Short.
I'd like to be a future report. I know the safety committee is starting to, I just got some scheduled for safety committee, but the last time we met was a while back, and from out that safety committee, there was a lot of priorities that we had. So I'd like to see for a future agenda report on the safety assessments, safety committee priorities, and future meetings planned for each site. I think we, Tim, we've been talking about this for a while. Hopefully maybe a summary of that and where we're at on the overall safety for our school sites. That seems to be a big issue after what recently just happened, so I think that should be on our agenda here in the near future. So other ones I thought would be good would be a report on our present bonds, and I know Matt's here, on Rancho Cordova, the state of facilities in those areas, and maybe an update from Matt on our CIP project schedules based on those funding sources changing, because the AV is changing, all things are changing, and pulling monies is going to be a dynamic thing, especially with AV declining now, so that's going to change things. So I would like to see that report, and also a report on test scores, basically on Rancho Cordova pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think there's a lot of confusion out there on test scores and what we did, and when we suspended testing in the last couple of years, there seems to be folks using data that's skewed, and so I think it'd be great to kind of see what our academic achievements have been post and pre-COVID, so that we have a better understanding of where we're going in the future with this. So those are the only things I would like to have to see on the agenda. If that be, if the board says okay, I think that would be kind of healthy for us.
Consensus, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sounds good. Any other?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
Make sure this thing is on.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we need to add to the agenda is our relationship, especially when we're talking about student services and SEL and our relationship with the Black Child Legacy Campaign, to have them come in and do a presentation. I think the board needs to be aware of what they're doing with our students in Rancho Cordova, as well as the families. So I'd like to see that on the agenda in the future. I'm excited to see that Blessings in a Backpack is going to be on next month. So I'm looking forward to that presentation with JD.
All right. Is everybody good with that? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Is that all? All right. Then that takes, we will be skipping agenda items related to recess to go back to closed session if needed. We do not need to. So that will take us to adjournment. I would just at this point want to maybe close in remembrance of Catherine Olson, who was an elementary music teacher who passed away in June. It was after our last meeting. We try to do our best to recognize teachers and staff who pass away while employed with our district, but we didn't miss Catherine. But I know that I know the superintendent and her staff are going to just remind the sites, the various options that they also have in ways that they can memorialize individuals. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often. It'd be nice if it never happens, but it does happen from time to time. So I'd just like to, I guess, dedicate the end of this meeting to Ms. Olson. So, all right, with that being said, unless there's an objection, we will adjourn by unanimous consent. Hearing none, we're adjourned.